In the summer of 2023, a friend sent me a very peculiar local classifieds ad. Peculiar because it made it feel like we were back on Bring a Trailer in 2010 before they started doing their own auctions. Peculiar because this is an E36 M3 sedan and BMW individual Mojave brown. These are things you don't see very often, especially on local classifieds. So upon freaking out, I immediately had to send to tens and tens of friends. 15 minutes later to my friend Mike, who I had originally met while he was driving his Daytona Violet E36 M3 at a coffee shop that I frequented. He hadn't had an E36 since then and had been enjoying his 993 Porsche, so of course being me, I had to infiltrate his mind with any good ad that I found. And being him, maybe of course, he couldn't pass up on this really rad and rare spec E36 M3. In just under 21 hours since it had been sent to me, I was suddenly a proud ad-sharing father, having gotten this car into a rad friend's hands and it now appearing in my driveway. 2 hours later, it attended its first car meet at Bonneville Foreign Service, our friend's shop. Of course, I had to convince Mike to bring the car so that we could show the tens of other friends I had sent this car to. I also then had the chance to dig into the details of this car a little bit deeper, seeing how clean this thing really was, and as our friend Alex even put it, the rear deck is currently fading because it's still in very good condition. 3 months and 1,000 miles later, Mike had put this car well through its paces on a couple road trips with friends, and often some daily or nightly use. Knowing that the inevitable would come and not sure how long he would keep it, it was time for both of us to head up one of our favorite canyons and get some beauty shots both in stills and video of this car. For the full video of this, see the link in the description, or if I can somehow figure out how to put it above. So as I mentioned, the inevitable, another 2 months down the road meant it was time to sell this car. This E36 was always the first on the chopping block for Mike, as his priorities still remained his 993 Porsche and his Acura DC2 race car. And although it wasn't too long of a time frame, I really do think he used this car more than most people would, even in a much longer ownership time frame. Being time to prep it for sale, I had the opportunity to be the one detailing this car and assessing everything that was going to be needed to make this shine as brightly as possible. We'll show you some befores here and you'll see, even I kind of doubted we needed to do that much. So as one can see, this car is very clean and still very original. The few demerits we'll say that we could find is a little bit of sag in the glove box, again the tiny bit of fade on the rear deck, and this one area of the headliner that was letting loose. And later you'll see we ended up finding a tear on the front of the driver's seat, and there was actually some repair on the passenger seat as well. But again, most of this car was very original, and you could tell that everything was taken care of. Even signs in the engine bay leading towards this thing was always kept very clean. There's not oil leaking anywhere. And the last thing to confirm on that front was actually looking at the underside. So as far as starting detailing, that's where we started first. Underside cleaning ended up being the first thing to really tackle here. I decided to take these plastic covers off to clean everything as well as possible so dirt isn't leaking out during the drying process or any other future cleaning. As well, what's important to note is that we're not seeing any oil, brake fluid, grease flinging around anywhere, especially around the rear diff or rear axles. You can see a little bit coming out of the CV boot, which is normal enough. Point being, we're not hiding anything and cleaning everything up. This car, again, very clean, very original, so we're getting it to present as well as possible for future photos and the listing. Also, in knowing I'm probably going to polish this paint, removing any trim for cleanup right now will be important for future contamination control. Starting with product for the underside, we have the Turtle Wax Hybrid Solutions Hyperfoam Wheel Cleaner and Tire Prep, probably my favorite, obviously for any tires, but also for underside cleaning. Let this stuff soak in and give it some agitation. It helps clean up any staining, any oil and dirt, especially with the agitation from the brush. As well, the Rapid Decon Iron Remover. This stuff's just good to use for anything around brake systems, as you see it turning red on the calipers. Here we have a half and half before and after. This is the after side, and the right side here is the before. Again, nothing really all that nasty, but it just makes everything present a whole lot better. And PSA here for any E36 guys, those rear quarters sure hold a lot of stuff, a lot of dirt, a lot of grime, and if you drive it in the winter, probably a lot of salt, so make sure you clean that out well. And a little example once again with a pressure washer of cleaning out these wheel wells. The Rapid Decon product is also the MVP for wheels. You'll see the before here, and although they don't look too nasty, you'll see how much iron is actually sitting embedded in these wheels. With some good agitation and a couple rounds, you get wheels looking like this. The final stage outside is just giving the car a general wash. The underside is already done and currently somewhat drying. This is just in prep for doing any work inside the garage, so doing that very last before pulling it in. As you can see here, the after on these wheel wells is pretty special with the plastic cleaned up and everything else all nice and clean. So in the slow crawl towards polishing the paint, the next thing that was up on the list was removing all of the door seals. Obviously a lot of dirt and grime can hide under these things, so once in the garage, remove those and clean those all by hand with microfibers and various cleaning products. Side trim was next, as well as taillights, headlights, kidney grills, any trim that was easy enough to remove that didn't take too long to do, but just made my job a whole lot easier when it came to polishing the paint and not having anything in the way. With all the bits removed from the front end too, I soon noticed that it was much easier to get to detailing the intricacies of the engine bay that's normally behind headlights and such. And those things can add up. When you're looking down in the engine bay or even looking through the grill and you see how dirty this fan is just with dust or any little markings, makes a huge difference. Even things like these door latches. That cleaned up makes a big difference. So getting the intricacies all cleaned up is both a form of contamination control and also just framing everything in very clean parts, as this car mostly was already that way, but through any use you're gonna get those little things your eyes might catch that could just clean up and make the whole car look a little bit better. Being an individual option car, there was also a couple fun things to find, like these labels on each of the bumpers and these stamps throughout the body panel. Don't know exactly what those mean, but another thing that we ended up finding out via a user on Bring a Trailer is that there was also an a la carte build sheet, which every E36 apparently is supposed to have a build sheet stapled to the bottom of their rear seat, but being as this was an individual car and there was some a la carte options ordered, we got a full breakdown finding that under the rear seat, which is pretty fun. With everything else that I didn't want the polisher touching taped off, it was then time to start work on the paint. We started with clay bar, and as you can see here, almost nothing came up, which is a good start. Then onto Turtle Wax's one and done compound with the M3 pattern sprayed onto the foam pad there. We got to work with polishing, and as you'll see here in a moment too, sometimes after I polish certain sections, I go back and look at where some of the deeper scratches are. I then mark those with the compound to remember where to hit them, because I can't always see them when I start polishing. Anyway, the rest is just visuals with a bunch of before and afters, so enjoy and see what we were able to get. Moving on to some other aesthetic bits, the owner Mike decided he wanted to replace these crumbling bump stops with brand new ones, helping the overall look of the wheel wells. While things were out as well, getting to detailing any areas that I couldn't previously reach when cleaning the car. And also repainting the brake calipers and replacing the rotors, as some of those bits were rusty around the edges, and replacing them is just a common item that the next owner then doesn't have to worry about. Mike also decided to replace the front lip, just to take a few more of those rock chips out of the front end and make it as clean as possible. I then moved on to all the side trim and bumper moldings, which I hand cleaned before putting back on. Of course, replaced all the broken clips. And finally, use some OG Turtle Wax trim dressing to make these black parts go back to looking black. Kidney grills were super gross. I then learned that you could actually split these apart, so I used some one and done compound to quick polish this chrome plastic back up, basically just removing all the crud that had built up on it. Then I used some Turtle Wax ceramic detailer to clean up these black plastics. Of course, I gotta flex that my photo's on the label, but sometimes all these black trim pieces need is just a little bit of a spray wax or any ceramic spray to clean the black parts up, usually just because some crud is built up on them. So you can see the before and after here makes a huge difference in the look of these kidney grills. The exhaust tips got a little bit of love here from the chrome polish. There wasn't a whole lot to do on these, mostly just some crud on the bottom side and just overall sheen. Before going back in, headlights were next, and at first glance these things don't look too bad, but the thing that you might not notice is just framing these in a complete clean package. The black plastics on these were pretty dirty, as well as the back of the bulb housings, and as the mounting is on the top of the headlight, it's something that you're always seeing when the engine bay is opening, so cleaning all those black plastics up makes for a very clean and complete package in the engine bay. Another specific area of the headlights that I often see makes headlights look not very good on E36s is actually the perimeter of the lens. When those are dirty or foggy, the entire lens looks dirty and foggy. Because they are also meant to be transparent, so looking through the transparent front and not being able to look completely through the transparent sides makes something look foggy or a little off. So again, framing this complete package in clarity makes a huge difference for the overall look. And again, although the lenses weren't that bad, I still gave them a little bit of a polish, and in the end, once installed, had to seal up and protect the lenses as well. You'll see the complete package here looking much, much better, or at least just obviously super clean. And at that does it for the exterior of this car. Mike ended up putting brand new tires on all four corners and replacing the 8.5-inch fronts with the original 7.5-inch. So with the tire installation schmutz cleaned off of those, the exterior was done, and I'm very, very pleased with the result of this car. And speaking of full details, moving to the interior, ultimately I didn't really have to do very much. It was just a simple wipe down, cleaning some of the seals of the windows, especially the tops, as those often get weird lines from just being closed, dirty, whatever. You can see some of what I got out of the seal there. And that was kind of the extent of it. Oh, actually, aside from the classic foam underneath the floor mats. So that I cleaned up and slowly, carefully placed back in there. I also wiped down the engine bay, not a lot of detail to run into there. But yeah, that's kind of it. And from there, it was time to move on to listing photos. So we did the underside photos inside my garage and then moved on to a couple different locations to do the rest. But for now, enjoy some before and afters. In the end, for me, this was just a hell of an experience. From finding it on local classifieds and sending it to a friend to infiltrate his life and wallet, and seeing him enjoy it in one of the best ways possible, and still including me. It was a really, really fun ride on a really, really special E36. This was the first individual spec E36 I ever got to be around, so that in itself was quite the ride. But being able to be a part of a Bring a Trailer auction beyond just photography, this was the first time for that for me. So getting to detail it, getting to drive it, getting to photograph it aside from just the Bring a Trailer ads, so on and so forth. This was just a good time. So in the end, this car went on to sell for $32,000 on Bring a Trailer in a no reserve auction. The ending was not as exciting as we had hoped, as there were no real last minute bidders, and even the guy who won it admitted that he did not expect to win it and kind of saw it on an Instagram story, went and bid on it on a whim, and ended up winning it. So I don't think he was necessarily disappointed, but just surprised. So again, in the end, if I may, because this is not my car, collectively we, aside from having not an exciting ending, felt that there was definitely more value in the car. But I think ultimately where the lack of value ended up being is that it's not a Porsche 911. In the E36 world, not everyone wants a brown car. As interesting as the spec is, it's just kind of the case. Not long after, a very similar mileage spec E36, but in a Storal Blue over Dove interior or gray interior, sold for 10 grand more. And I think that's the best sign to say that E36s most heavily work off of the poster spec, that or rarity spec in, say, the E36 lightweight or the GT Evo, so on and so forth. So this episode is not for debating that. That's just what our minds found, and it just was what it was. What's most important is that this experience as a whole was fun. Mike had a good time owning it, didn't lose money on it, we'll say that. And yeah, it's just a special time to be around special cars for, guess what, a special experience. Hey, what's up, guys? It's Sam and Mike out here. We're just... Oh, there he is. We're just filming this video today, buddy. We got the Mojave Brown Individual Metallic BMW 36 M3 45, and we're gonna get it done today. Let's go.